Is it going to be a long show?
No.
Oh, no. All right.
Well, gloom and doom is soon to depart across much of the eastern part of the United States. It's a slow process, getting rid of the remnant low and the upper low that's all tied together with what was Hurricane Helene. And we'll talk about that and the rest of the week. Things actually are calming down for the most part in a lot of different ways. So let's get to it on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And of course, if you'd like to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, you certainly are welcome to do so by using our referral link to Amazon. And you can find that on the descriptor to this podcast. You can also find it pinned to the top of the chat board. It's pretty simple. Use the referral link, then go on the search bar, buy whatever it is you want to buy, and Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin on them. And it's a great way to support us, and it doesn't cost you anything out of pocket. So support the Joe and Joe podcast by shopping our referral link on Amazon. All right, here we go. It's Monday, Joe. It's the last day of September. We only got 3 months left before the year is over with. It just, Maggie Smith, I was a big fan of Maggie Smith, and she died back last Friday. And they asked her about getting older, and she quoted Noel Coward saying, growing old means you have breakfast every 30 minutes. In other words, time goes by so quickly that a day goes by so quickly that you just feel like you're always eating breakfast all the time and starting a new day. That's kind of how this year has been, sort of flown by. Here we are getting ready to go into the last 3 months.
And I see on the chat board, Joe, while you were talking about Maggie Smith, that another very famous person has passed, Pete Rose.
Yeah, I just see that from Vince Croce putting it on the chat board.
83, and that's kind of sad that he passed away without ever saying. I know that you're not supposed to gamble on baseball games, and he apparently did that when he was a manager of the Cincinnati Reds, and they banned him from baseball. But you know what? I know of a number of other players who probably committed a lot more in terms of atrocities and failures in their careers that they're in the Hall of Fame. And Pete Rose, more hits than anybody else has amassed. Charlie Hustle, as Whitey Ford of the Yankees called him when he first saw him in an exhibition game back when Pete Rose was just a rookie. It's just kind of sad. And 83 years old, and I guess he had a good life. Even though the last 20 or 25 years or whatever, he had to. He had to do a lot of things. He had to go to baseball card shows, and he had to scrounge, and people looking at him, in various different ways. I think. Anyway, he has gone to the great beyond, that great big ballpark in the sky. Pete Rose again. Thank you, Vincent Croce, for posting that. Passing away at 83 years old.
We've got mostly quiet weather conditions really around the country. There are a few exceptions here, but oftentimes when you get a major hurricane, you then go into a stretch of calm weather. That's kind of, I think, where we're headed this week. There was also, models were also trying to spin up another hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. That looks like, we talked about this yesterday about the fact that the setup in the Gulf of Mexico and across the United States was a bit more hostile this time around for tropical cyclones development. And something may still come out of there, but it doesn't appear like it's going to be anything problematic at this point. Certainly nothing's going to happen during the rest of this work week. And I think the folks in the interior Carolinas and elsewhere in the Southeast and in Florida are happy about that.
I do want to say one thing, Joe. You started off by talking about gloom and doom. I don't know where the gloom and doom was today. I certainly was thinking that we were going to have gloomy skies here in Putnam Valley and parts of the lower Hudson Valley. But I got to tell you something. This was a glorious day today. We
Sun
had,
came out. Yeah, no. A lot of the East was dealing with cloud cover, but yeah, the gloom and doom. I was just speaking in general with respect to the eastern part of the United States. There has been improvement, and I think there's probably going to be continued improvement tomorrow because this low is moving out and it's going to buy, and uh, that should allow for general improvement everywhere east of the Mississippi because there are a lot of areas that are still sitting in a lot of clouds, like me.
yeah, well, we had, at one point, I was like looking around. I had some stuff to do outside, which I wasn't very happy to have to do. I won't get into that. And I was kind of hoping that if I had to do it, I was going to have to do it at least under clouds. And I had a sweatshirt on, and I figured it was going to be kind of a coolish, 60s to around 70. And it turned out to be glorious. I mean, where I was around 1, 2, 3 o'clock, blue skies, bright sunshine, only a few scattered clouds. And we peaked here in Putnam Valley at 75 degrees today. I
Yeah.
know New York City had a bit of sunshine and they got up to about 70, but it was one of the nicest days we've had here in quite some time. And now I can see the clouds are rolling back in. So gloom and doom reasserting itself tonight. And maybe we'll have a few more of those gloomy, cloudy skies to look at for tomorrow.
Well, we'll see. In the meantime, just wanted to say welcome to everybody on the chat board, and welcome to those of you who are watching in the background on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Our show is on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. Sometimes we come on a Friday and Saturday if there's a storm going on. And you could also find the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast on various podcast outlets like Spotify and YouTube podcasts and Apple podcasts, among others. So note that down. If you like the show, hit the like button because everybody likes to be liked. And of course, if you do subscribe, turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. Now, as far as watches and warnings and advisories and so on, there's not a whole heck of a lot, but I do want to point out that in central Virginia and even into parts of northwestern Virginia, we used to have flood watches up, and there have been various flash flood warnings that have gone up here and there today in parts of southern Virginia and also in central North Carolina. In fact, there were a couple of tornado warnings earlier, Joe, that I saw pop up in a few places. These were isolated severe thunderstorms that developed. A little quick updating by SPC had to occur this afternoon. Otherwise, we've got some freeze watches up for parts of the western Dakotas and north into Wyoming, also in western Montana. Red flag warnings for dry conditions, and we've got various wind advisories up for parts of North Dakota into Minnesota. We have excessive heat warnings for the eastern counties of Arizona, as well as for Southern California, Southern Nevada, and heat advisories that go up the coast with a few counties here and there under excessive heat warnings in the Golden State. But everywhere else on the quiet side. And as we check out the satellite loop tonight, that pesky upper low, the upper trough, still there but weakening. And you'll notice that there's actually were breaks that developed in between bands of cloud cover. The northern fringe of that over you, Joe, looks like some drier air from New England pushed down far enough south to at least partially clear it out today, as you said, over you and into northern New Jersey and Long Island and southern New England. But it was a heavier overcast back in Pennsylvania and down into northeastern Virginia. Also, sunshine was back in the eastern Carolinas in some places and down into southern Georgia, but not so much here in North Georgia. And the uh, cloudiness extending back to the Mississippi River. But overall, and if you look up on to the northwest of that into western Minnesota and points eastward, there's two sharp lines of clouds. That's an approaching cold front that's moving eastward. So that's basically the kicker that we needed to get this thing out of the way. And we'll have all of this start to translate offshore over the next 36 hours or so.
It's going to act like a gigantic whisk broom, if you will, by later on in the week. And we were talking yesterday, Joe, about the fact that we, here in the Hudson Valley and New York, we were stuck with gloomy skies. But I think you also mentioned that across central and northern New England, it turned out to be a beautiful Sunday with that drier air. And apparently, as you just mentioned, enough of that drier air from central and northern New England was able to filter south and help to break the cloud cover during the early part of the day today locally here in the lower Hudson Valley. Didn't quite make it so far south to clear things out, let's say, across much of southeastern and eastern Pennsylvania and much of New Jersey, but it just was able to get as far south as our area, and that again set the stage for some great weather with lots and lots of sunshine. So we'll see again a return to the clouds. As you see on the radar, it's on the screen right now. A fair amount of Pennsylvania has precipitation due to that upper level disturbance, that upper low, and some of that moisture actually belongs to the remnants of what was once Helene. So we're going to have to deal with this now for the next couple of days. But as Joe pointed out also, out west, there's that band of clouds associated with that cold front, and that front will come rolling on through here probably during the beginning of the day on Thursday, helping to push those clouds out and bring in a much drier and clearer airflow. And incidentally, it doesn't appear that it's going to last too long. We've got another front coming down from Canada, and that frontal zone is going to be arriving here at the start of next weekend and could bring clouds and maybe even a few showers to kick off our first weekend in October on Saturday.
And in Virginia, right now, you can see the green boxes. Those are the various flash flood warnings that are up. It's not like it was days ago when Helene came inland and you had pretty much entire states just covered in flash flood warnings. So these are much more isolated, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a cluster of heavier downpours and some thunderstorms in eastern North Carolina, mainly east of I-95. A few scattered light showers in the western mountains, and they don't want to see any rain there. So if you're going to see anything, at least let it be on the light side. Otherwise, further south, we've got a couple of clusters down in South Florida. We have a few showers in parts of New Mexico, up I-25 into southern Colorado, and then west along north of I-10 into Arizona. And as you can see, those lines of clouds that we showed you moving through the upper Midwest, producing two narrow lines of showers, western Lake Superior, down into southeastern Minnesota and into northern Iowa. This is all, pretty much light stuff. Storm Prediction Center has a small area of marginal risk in eastern North Carolina, and even the areas of general thunderstorm activity are pretty minimal for today. Tomorrow, no severe weather is forecast, just some small areas in southeast Virginia, eastern North Carolina, Florida, except the Panhandle, southern Arizona, into a small portion of New Mexico, and eastern Michigan, northeast Indiana, across Ohio, northwest PA, and western New York, where you see the chance that there could be some general thunderstorm activity. But judging from what we have going on right now, this is not going to be widespread stuff. This is going to be more isolated in nature. And taking a look at day three, small area in Arizona into New Mexico, central and South Florida. The rest of the nation, no severe weather is being forecast. And just checking out WPC on their 7-day rainfall forecast, Joe, no rain. Southern and southeastern New England to about New York City, Long Island, and central and South Jersey. A couple of hundreds maybe in North Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania and on up into upstate New York, except a little bit more when you get up closer to the Canadian border, about a quarter of an inch, maybe a half inch in eastern Maine. The cluster of rain in southeastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina is anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to as much as 2 inches. That's going to be convectively driven. But much of the country really very dry, particularly from the Mississippi River west, where hardly any precipit's going to fall in the next week. Florida, central Florida, looks like some several inch rain amounts. A lot's going to depend on tropical moisture from a disturbance that will eventually wind up in the Gulf of Mexico. Otherwise, the rainfall amounts in South Florida, we're talking about under an inch going on over there. So, October is one of the driest, for many areas, actually, it's the driest month of the year. So this to me looks like it's playing out exactly that way, as at least certainly a dry start to the year.
Actually, October is well noted across much of the eastern third of the country as being the clearest time of the year, in part because of the perennial ridge of high pressure that builds over the Virginias and sets the stage for not only clear skies, but also the warming trend that has been referred to, at least in days past or years past, as Indian summer. I'm not sure whether or not that is a politically correct term to use anymore, but in any case, a surge of milder or warmer conditions usually crops up sometime during October. And there's an old saying in New England, October is always the month with at least 19 clear days. So I don't know if that's going to be the case this year, but looking forward and hoping that we'll have more in the way of sunshine because we certainly have been stuck. Well, but not today, at least here and where I live, but we have had a stretch of rather dreary weather, and it looks like the dreary weather will continue or come back over the next couple of days before we clean things out with that weather front later on in the week.
All right, the Atlantic tropics are busy, but they're busy in places where it's not going to really impact anyone, and that's a good thing. We've got Joyce, which is now weakening. It is a tropical depression. And as of 5 o'clock, it was Eastern time. It was at 22.7 and 48.9 with top winds of 30 knots or 35 miles per hour. Joyce is probably going to dissipate because there's a lot of shear up in that part of the Atlantic. To the southwest of that, we have Tropical Storm Kirk, that's at 13.6 and 35.7 west. So the Cabo Verde Islands are at around 25, so it's about 600 miles to the west southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. That's moving west at 10, and that's going to become a major hurricane in the Atlantic in a couple of days. We have a disturbance behind that, low pressure that's a few hundred miles south of the Cabo Verde Islands becoming better organized. And this is forecast to perhaps become a tropical depression in the next couple of days as well. And we can actually see that on the what's going on here on this wide satellite loop. Kirk is very well defined already. It's sticking out like a sore thumb in the tropical Atlantic. Joyce, on the other hand, if you look at what's going on, you can sort of see the weak circulation before the sunset goes by. And then as you watch the enhanced clouds, they're all kind of being blown away from southwest to northeast. So there is shear going on up in this zone. And then southwest of Kirk, you can see there's a concentration of thunderstorms that's developing, has a little curvature to it. That is what the Hurricane Center is also thinking it could become a depression or a tropical storm in a couple of days. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, we have a disturbance here, and you know you could see a few things going on. First off, Joe, there's an upper low in the central Caribbean, so there's that. The disturbance is going to, probably have a broad area of low pressure here. But when I look at what's going on in terms of the flow of clouds and in the upper air, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, where you've got clouds moving very quickly from south to north, this to me, as every day goes by, we've seen the models back off on the idea that we're going to see a hurricane develop in the Northwest Caribbean and have another one going into the Gulf of Mexico this weekend. I think, given what's going on in the upper atmosphere, that probably is not going to be the case.
And the next storm on the list, by the way, after Kirk, the K storm, is the L storm, which I presume might, and I put that in quote marks, might form in the Gulf of Mexico. And if it does, it will be Leslie. And I believe, Joe, we're up to what now, 11 storms so far?
So Kirk is number 11, and it became a tropical storm under the wire. So we actually had what F, G, H, I, J, and K, six storms for this month of December. So we're up to 11. The Hurricane Center says 17 is their bottom number. I think after the way September has turned out, I think That 17 is probably still doable. I don't
I
think the 24, no, but the 17, I think they got a shot for.
I think that it is within range of getting to 17, although if you remember a couple of weeks ago, my own personal prediction was for 15 storms. What I think is going to happen, Joe, is I think we're going to get off to a fast start in October, and we're already seeing that. But I think as we move toward the middle and latter part of the month, the tropical activity is going to start to peter out. Whether or not it peters out when we get to, let's say, numbers like 15 or 16 or 17, that's going to be yet to be seen. But it's it's close to being. I think it'll be close to a normal uh, season for tropical activity, and who knows? I mean, we may very well see a tropical system affect the Atlantic seaboard. Maybe not. We'll have to see how that all pans out. The last few years, I've been saying the place that seemed to have a crosshair on them is Atlantic Canada, with Nova Scotia and Newfoundland getting hit over the last few summers or falls, and we'll see. Maybe something in line for them later in October or even early November. Again, we'll just have to wait, watch, and see.
Right. And all these ocean storms count. You might see, maybe the bulk of what comes forward will probably be more out in the Atlantic somewhere, and not have consequences for the mainland, but we'll see. And by the way, on the system that's uh, coming out of the Northwest Caribbean, eventually going to the Gulf of Mexico, the Hurricane Center's really pared back on their development chances down to, no, they had it at 50%, so now they're at 40%. They're kind of holding it there. And that's a reflection of what's going on in the upper air. We're going to have a lot more shear to deal with, particularly along the Gulf Coast. So I'd be shocked. We've gone from all of the models showing some sort of wrapped up, maybe a Cat 2 hurricane, to now, okay, maybe we get a depression out of this, maybe we get a tropical storm. Meanwhile, you can see what's happening here in the east as low pressure translates offshore. So that's the remnants of Helene in the upper low, the upper trough with that getting out of the way. Then you've got an upper trough moving into eastern Canada with a cold front, and that's the broom that Joe mentioned about being the push broom that is sweeping everything out. And then we have one of these rare maps, these rare times on the models or for Thursday where I don't see hardly any precipitation anywhere from coast to coast. So, you don't get too many days like that, but there you have it. You got one here now. And as we head into Friday and the weekend, looks like another upper trough and cold front wants to approach on Saturday with maybe a couple of showers, but it's not like it's an all-day rain. It'll just be a brief interruption from what I'm seeing, to be followed by another high building in for Sunday and early next week. One of the things we had that stretch, Joe, of how it was, I think it was 16 days before we finally saw some rain, correct?
Right, right.
Well, it seems like we've had an onshore flow just about every day for the last 2+ weeks. And that is finally going to be breaking down. This has been one of the longer, more persistent onshore flows that I've seen in a long, long time. It was just that kind of setup with the highs going up into east of New England and getting the east winds for days and days. And we had a stretch there where every day there was coastal flood advisories up. That's kind of calmed down a bit now. But the way it stands, it looks like, at least for the rest of this week and through this weekend, we've got no major storms, hardly any severe weather to worry about. As I said earlier, oftentimes after you get a major hurricane, the weather the atmosphere has exhaled, and now it's in a bit of a calm phase, and calm phase might last for a little while.
It'll be nice. Calm is. I'm not going to argue. Maybe in our younger days, Joe, we used to be kind of teed off at the fact that we have a long stretch of calm weather or tranquil weather, because we were what got us into this business was dynamic meteorology. But now I don't know about you, but now that I'm getting up there in years, I like calm.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. Um, all right, let's do a little Briller Jeopardy because I think you probably have it.
I have it indeed, and we'll be getting to that just a moment as I open up the uh, the envelope in cyberspace that is provided to me by Mr. Briller, and we'll get right to it. And here it is. I have it right now in front of me. He says, Joe, on this Briller Jeopardy, weather extremes in Central Park, and even though it's not officially begun yet, the month of October, what was the highest temperature ever in October in Central Park? The highest temperature ever recorded at Central Park in the month of October. And if you know the date, that's,
So I will say is probably a recent, semi-recent date. So I'll say 90, 92,
what did you say, 92?
92.
92. Good guess, wrong answer, unfortunately.
All right.
And in fact,
Uh,
I will tell you this. I will tell you this. We did get as high as 93, I think about 3 or 4 years ago in early October, but that even that was not the all-time high for October. The all-time high,
well,
let's
Vincent
see, for
Croce
some of the
has
people on the
94.
chat board.
Well, Vincent Croce and Miss Fal has 94, and Miss Fowlerite says 95. Ken Muzillo said 95. Not
Well,
high
there's
enough.
who said 94? Owen Daniel,
Owen Daniel and Vincent Croce and Chuck
Vincent Croce,
Cardillo.
Chuck Cardillo, yeah, that's 94, and that was set back on October 5th, 1941.
Okay,
2 months and 2 days before the day that would live in infamy. But
right.
October 5th, 1941, a hot October day at 94. Now, that having been said, what is the lowest temperature ever recorded in the month of October at Central Park?
I will say, I'm thinking if this is right, it's probably toward the end of the month. So I'll say 32.
Well, that's not a great, it's a pretty good guess, but unfortunately not correct. But I will tell
Higher,
you
too high, too low.
you were too high. Rich Rothmansky got it with a 28-degree reading. Craig Carlberg, you were close with 29, but Rich got it at 28, and that 28 was recorded on October 27th, 4 days before Halloween in 1936. And quite frankly, Joe, I would have said maybe around 30 or 29, based upon the fact that we had snow, if you remember,
Oh,
in
right. Yeah.
2010 on October 29th, the storm that brought my area about 14 inches of heavy wet snow and caused a goodly amount of damage to trees all over my area. Remember, I stepping outside on my front door, and it sounded like gunshots every few minutes. And what it was tree limbs and branches that were breaking off. Still, in leaf, the trees were, and just that heavy, wet snow falling upon the trees and causing all kinds of damage. Anyway, that was in 2011. Again, coldest ever in October 27, excuse me, 28 in October 27th, 1936. Now, what was the coldest daytime
High,
minimum? The
the
coldest
coldest
daytime
daytime maximum.
maximum. Yes.
I gotta think it'd be a day where it didn't get out, at least didn't get out of the 40s. So I'll go on the low end of that. I'll say 43.
Joe, you're kind of warm on that, believe it or not.
Okay.
Now, what we're
Um,
looking for on the chat, you folks on the chat board, we're looking for the coldest daytime high in October. Vincent Croce, 39. Not quite, but you're in snake country.
Michael
CWPR
Zara has
Shark at
38.
36. Michael Azera, you hit it, 38 degrees. And that was recorded on October 30th, the day before Thanksgiving, the day before Halloween in 1925.
All right.
All right. So, what is the greatest amount of snow ever to fall in the entire month of October? And I kind of gave it away, didn't I, with this question?
Well,
Uh,
I'm trying to remember. I mean, I know there was like a Columbus Day where we had a trace. So I'm going to say um, 2.3 inches. I don't know what
Well,
the date is, or
well,
2.1, 2.
I actually gave part of it away, Joe, because I mentioned the 14 inches I had on October 29th, 2011. And on that same day, while I had 14, Central Park recorded by far and away the greatest amount of snow that they ever had in the entire month of October, 2.9 inches. And I know
2.9.
we had a couple of people who were very close with that. Um,
Well, if you
yes,
anybody that went from, say, let's say from, that said from 2.5 to 3.1, you're good. You got
that's
it.
right, because that's just Central Park. I'm sure the Bronx on that day probably had more than 2.9 inches, and other places had maybe a little bit less.
Right.
But that's it. And believe it or not, that's it tonight. We only had four questions, so
Okay.
that's everybody for tonight.
Well, that's good because you know what? I haven't even eaten dinner yet, so that's what I'm going to do. So
Oh,
if
okay.
those of you on the chat board, if you haven't eaten dinner, you can do it now because we're going to say good night, and we'll see you everybody tomorrow at 7:35 p.m. Eastern time.
And
Okay?
congratulations to both the New York Mets and the Atlanta Braves. I don't think it's ever happened in the history of baseball where two teams celebrated winning or clinching a postseason berth on the same day in the same ballpark. But the Mets had a doubleheader with the Atlanta Braves. They won the first game. The Braves won the second game. They're both going to the postseason, and congratulations to both. And by the way, if any of you had a chance to see that first game, the first game between the Mets and the Braves, Joe, as a lifetime, long-time Met fan, I had to consider that first game among the top three games, three most exciting games I've ever seen. That ranked among the three. An incredible game. It was kind of like the baseball equivalent of Rocky 2. If you saw the movie Rocky 2, there's one point with Apollo Creed and Rocky are in the middle of the ring, and you hear the announcer saying, "Now it's Creed, now it's Balboa, now it's Creed, now it's Balboa." The last two innings of that game today, and in Atlanta, was probably the most exciting and probably the most memorable two innings that the Mets have ever had in their entire 60 plus year history. And anyway, they're on their way to the playoffs like the Yankees, and we'll see what happens in the weeks ahead.
Okie doke. All right, everybody, have a great night. We'll see you all tomorrow. Night night.